Great, recording in progress. Okay, so just to say that the Collective Impact Program is part of the Social Gastronomy Movement. The majority of you who are here already know about that, but this is a global network of individuals and organizations that are using food as a tool to co-create an equitable future, inclusive society and healthy planet. So we've got people from many countries and continents, and a lot of you probably already know the work of some of the people that are on this call. We could spend an hour and a half just talking about the amazing work that all the people in the network are doing. And from that social gastronomy movement was about 2018 when the social gastronomy movement started. There was a summit in Miami, and in that summit, there was discussions amongst the community about what was then called a hub. And that was visioned as a physical space for local activity and cross-sector collaboration. And in 2020, there was another summit, and there were further conversations about this hub concept. And in conversations with Patrick, who's not on this call today, but has been a major part of this, and Michelle, who is on the call with us today, we started to get clearer about what was the essence behind this hub, to really get down to the essence of it. And what came was, rather than a physical space, which was a mechanism for the cross-sector collaboration, it was more about the quality with which we facilitated and coordinated cross-sector collaboration. And the paradigms that were behind doing it differently. And it was at that point that Cargill, who have generously funded the social gastronomy movement, backed our taking forward of this concept of the hub into the essence of facilitating cross-sector collaboration. And from that, CIP was born, the Collective Impact Program. And in 2021, we brought together Patrick, Michelle, and Hafa. And we were looked at to decode the best practices that were already happening, and to really understand what was common about their approach that made the difference. So, you know, Hafa's had a lot of success with the Comida para Todos program, and even before that. And Michelle has been working in the Twin Cities, and you're also going to hear from her. And also Patrick's been doing a lot of work with basically being able to leverage relationships and networks and make amazing things happen. So we're like, well, how do you guys do that? And we spent a couple of months to really decode that. And I think what's important to say is that, you know, these are grassroots organizations with very small budgets. We're not talking about big organizations with big budgets and lots of personnel. We're talking about how people are able to mobilize their social capital to make amazing things happen. And we wanted to understand that. And as part of that conversation, what we started to understand, and this was one of the models that helped us to have the discussion, was that you can see that these are the 6 conditions that hold like a systemic problems in place. This is one model, Waters of Systems Change. And the conversation really revolved around the fact that a lot of efforts can sometimes be about sharing best practices and what we're going to do, which is more along the structural change at the top. But when we talked with Michelle, Patrick, and Hafa, why they were able to leverage and make so much change came down to the quality of the relationships, connections, power dynamics, and mental models, which we called the social context. And one of the questions we asked ourselves is, when we're talking about social impact, what is the social in this impact? And the social for us, when we had this conversation, was around those quality of relationships, power dynamics, and mental models is what gives birth to the physical world that we're creating. And so as we look to decode what is really making the difference, and we looked at Hafa's example with Comida para Todos, where they were managing to mobilize huge amounts of unused resources so that they could be supporting of delivery and of food. Initially, that was where it started, to huge amounts of people, considering the time and people that were involved. We started to come down and decode, well, what is this quality of collaboration? And this was our first attempt, is that we understood that there was a real importance around some certain shifts in how we worked. and what was key about their work that maybe sometimes isn't happening out there in the world. And so I'm just going to let you read through these actually, rather than me talk about this. So I'm just going to give like a couple of 30 seconds or so, just for you to have a look at these shifts that we felt were key in the work. So you can see that these are shifts in social context in terms of relationships and power dynamics and how we co-create. And that was really important. In particular, the doing with aspect was important because there was a perception of how the difference between creating a partnership that enabled autonomy and making a service that created dependency for those populations that are marginalized, and the difference of recognizing the expertise of people who have lived experience of food insecurity and inequity, which was the focus of this program. Sorry, I'm coming to mention that, but I'm reminding myself that I didn't mention that. And the fact that when we do with, more of the money and resources gets to arrive at within the populations that are experiencing marginalization. So that was really important. And the fact that we are asset focused, so we don't just look at what people need, but we look at the strengths that they have, so we don't reinforce narratives that of poor, needy people that need everyone else to come and save them, which kind of has a real strong effect on dignity and ability for people to self-value. These were some of the other aspects that we came across that we mentioned in the shifts. I'd say these are the more subtle ones in terms of these support the other ones to happen, although maybe the connection and trust and care for the whole was also very central. I'm going to skip across that because I don't want to spend too much time on conceptual stuff. You'll see it when the host teams explain. So the Collective Impact Program was born, and this was the statement that we exist to support an equitable, inclusive, and more effective approach to cross-sector collaboration. And we initiated that with a global community of practice of 6 host teams. And that was basically a collective of 3 or more people representing different organizations. And they would follow a shared approach based on the principles that we developed and a common pathway. So this was the common pathway, like how are we all gathering together to do this cross-sector collaboration? What do we have in conversation? So there was a phase of intention and invitation to really understand the aspirations and engaging the networks, then learning about the local context, cultivating connection and trust, and then plenum, moving to action, discovering what we were going to do together that we couldn't do alone. And then there was moving into the multi-stakeholder action teams or prototyping teams, and then those teams coming back to report on what happened. And this is the basic pathway that we looked at. And how CIP supported that was with this framework co-created, collective meeting designs and facilitation toolkits, which I wanted to thank Peter Pooler and Rob and Charles Holmes and James, who's also on the call, who helped to develop. So we worked with people who have got a lot of experience as well in facilitation to develop those toolkits. And they were offered as a guide that ultimately all of the host teams could do whatever it is they felt was relevant in their local context. We were just providing possibilities. And so we ended up onboarding 6 host teams from around the world. So Nepal and Chile, which was focused on Santiago, and Medellin, and the Twin Cities, and Murtala. And it was a process to really not just onboard them, but to support them in the process of forming the team. Some teams weren't formed, some teams were forming. Medellin, for example, was really forming from nothing, whereas, well, it's never from nothing, of course, but from less than, for example, Twin Cities that had been going for many, many years and doing this work, and Nepal, and also and Murtala. So these were the teams that we brought on board. And then And then I just wanted to say that from July to December from July is when the host teams really onboarded of last year, and we started to get going together. And just want to remind everyone that there was this thing called COVID. So we were starting a cross-sector collaboration program in a moment where it was incredibly difficult for people to gather. And that was a major challenge for us. And one of the other challenges on the way was that the initial shift in social context and those that I presented earlier, and even the pathway, felt complex and was lacking in a bit of focus. So from that, and from that time, from July to December, there was attempts to walk along the pathway, gather the communities, but we're a prototype. We were learning what is it that's working and not working about our common framework. And so I'm going to go this really quickly. This more complex, as you can see there, turned into really the focus, which was about doing with and not for, where people with a lived experience of food insecurity participate in planning, implementing and evaluating solutions, which came down to 3 main pillars. So diversity and equity, sharing power and co-creation, and building trust. And it was by doing this simplification that it made it easier for all of us host teams to talk together about what was common about the approach and to develop an evaluation system based on this. This pathway that was more complex came down to more focused on a plenum, on engaging a steering committee and having a plenum to go towards action. There was a real tension between taking the time to build up relationships and context and having conversation, but a lot of people in urgent situations just like, when are we going to take action? So this was really, we had to kind of get more focused on getting to the point. And so we focused more on the plenum, which was about bringing the diverse interconnected stakeholders together. And we focused on these 5 objectives for the plenum, ultimately from which are born multi-stakeholder action teams. And that was kind of the goal that we were aiming towards, to get to a stage where multi-stakeholder action teams had emerged from what a cross-sector community had decided was important, and not some other entity that was outside of the local community or just one entity within the community. And oh, that's the next stage. That's the context I really wanted to set right now. And I think at this stage, we can just hear from the host teams. But yeah, once again, I just want to thank, Cargill was key in supporting this to happen. And there were so many people that helped along the way. And but actually, like at the end, we'd like to thank all of those people and make sure that we're recognizing everyone. But right now, I'm super excited to jump in and hear from the host teams about what actually happened on that journey. So yeah, I'd like to hand it over to the host teams. And we're going to start with Carlota from Mertala.
Hi. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here, celebrating with us. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Carlota and I'm from the Mertala host team. And Mertala is a small town in southeast Portugal, and we are in a rural context. So our host team is composed by 3 organizations: Associação Terra Sintrópica, a local association, the municipality, and a professional school. But we're really part of a much broader network, our local food network. Our context can be seen as a context of scarcity. We are in a semi-arid climate. We have very low precipitation. The temperatures are really, really extreme. So we have very high temperatures in the summer, very, very low temperatures in the winter. We're in risk of desertification, and we're very vulnerable to climate change. And our social context is, depopulation. We have very low population. there's an increasing elderly population and also in risk of isolation. However, that context of scarcity in our community, we changed it into a context of abundance through many different strategies. And one of them was to really focus on techniques for regenerative agriculture, so we could be stronger and could face these challenges better. We also focused on working on a local food network and engaging the community, and really in a model of participatory governance. So this local food network is to promote local food by growing food locally, consuming locally, but also through a participatory governance model where everyone is involved in deciding what this strategy really is. So what we did in terms of engaging the community, we had two main moments. The first one was within our food network, just to understand what our strategy were, what good practices existed within the work that we were already doing, and that we wanted to continue forward, but also about participatory governance. So how we could involve more sectors, how could people participate better and feel safer in these spaces to really contribute to a strategy that is a collective one and should be co-created. And then we finally did our plenum on the 6th of June, and 26 people attended, which in our context is really, really good. And we had people from the public sector, private sector, and third sector, not-for-profit. In terms of our outcome, we had 5 multi-stakeholder teams as a result of this plenum. These teams came out of proposals from the participants, and within the plenum, they had to just to create goals for each team, time frames, and then at the end of the plenum, they would just put their name under the teams that they would want to collaborate as a multi-stakeholder action team. In terms of the outcomes, we did a survey, and what people shared with us is that they really enjoyed having a space to share their ideas. They also really liked the methodology we used. It was open space. It was really flexible, and it really invites people to share their ideas and their proposals. They also liked the dynamics we did in terms of group engagement, and they really enjoyed just sharing a meal and getting together and having a space to celebrate and be together. In terms of achievement, we were able to really engage the community to create momentum. As Q said, we had a pandemic, and it was really difficult to kind of to restart all of these processes again after, you know, such a difficult moment. We were also able to engage new sectors in this process that hadn't been engaged before. And for us that had been working in the food network, we also gained new perspectives on the work that we had been doing, and that was really, really good. And in terms of continuity, our ideal scenario would be to continue checking in with teams, to be able to facilitate these meetings, to continue engaging the community. We thought that doing workshops and talks around these issues would be really good to continue capacitating the community, and also to just continue disseminating this work so people can join, and they can join at whatever point they are and how they want, you know, whatever feels better for them, and to also organize a new plenum to discuss these results maybe around October this year. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here to celebrating this with us. And please get in touch. This is our email. And if you want to visit, please do, but come either in spring or in autumn. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Carlota. These are thank you so much. These are just brief overviews, and we're going to go into more depth, just hearing some actual stories of things that happened after we've got a brief overview from all of the host teams. So I'd like to invite Claudia to present from Medellin.
Perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So, hello all, thank you for being here. Today I'm part of the host team in Medellin. I'm the coordinator within the team. So basically, I'll start with describing our entities. So as you said, our host team basically we came kind of from scratch because we had to create something that hadn't been created in our city. So for that, we tried to unify different sectors that represented different interests and different, that represented different interests in the city. So we joined Platos Sin Fronteras, which is an NGO, Griffith Foods, which belongs to the private sector, and the Universidad de Antioquia, which is the academic sector. All three entities united through different key people in their institutions, and we created the host team in Medellin. Our local context. In Medellin, there's a situation of, let's say, a significant situation of food insecurity. More than half of the population has some type of food insecurity, and for at least 14% of households are in a situation of severe food insecurity. So it's a topic that is very present and let's say it was exacerbated by the pandemic as well. So it's a situation that is constantly in the visual. There's a lot of poverty also in the city and in the country, and that ties directly with more vulnerability in the terms of malnutrition. And we also started in the context of social unrest and protests. So when the country was like more in upheaval and there was a lot of, let's say, outrage with the government, that's when the CAP program was born. So we tried to use that as leverage and as a catalyst for what we wanted to do, which was to provoke change in our local food system. So that said, we immediately we began with our community conversations. We basically, like Carlota mentioned, we had community conversations and then our plenum and some activities in between. So activities that we would highlight, we had community conversations. We had 3 community conversations, 2 via Zoom and 1 in person, engaging different actors. So for example, in this, you can see there's government, there's private sector, there's public sector. There were like key institutions that participated in this process, and that basically led to a space of wondering, what do we have to do? How can we do it? How do we achieve it? We did like several different mural boards where we determined like what were the challenges that we wanted to face, how do we focus these challenges, what actions could we take. But this part was mostly like getting to learn what we saw in common, like how did the different sectors unite in their vision of what we can fight against food insecurity and food inequity. So it was more of a theoretical part, and then we started into the actions. So for example, one major action that we did was collaborating in the universal plate. In both Bogota and Medellin, there was like a very strong movement in the universal plate. In Bogota, we had more than 10,000 plates delivered, and in Medellin, we had more than 2,000 plates delivered, and all in the let's say in the framework of collective collaboration, cross-sector collaboration, and it was one of the biggest examples that we had that this could work. Then we had our plenum. Our plenum, we did basically a whole day plenum with different sectors. There was, let's say, at least there were like 26 participants as well, which was a lot more than we were expecting, because since it's such a big system in Medellin, we wanted to focus it on like key actors that would lead to bigger impacts, let's say. But at the end, there was like a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of different actors participating, and 16 different institutions were represented. The plenum was a beautiful space, and we received a lot of feedback. There were participants who had suffered from food insecurity, food inequity during their whole life. So that really set the tone for what was important during the session. There was the space for the Santino's opinions, there was safety. So that was like one of the main outcomes that we had. There was like this sense of community and of we can do something great together. And that was like the sense that permeated the whole session. And that was also like at the same time the achievement that we the whole system managed to be active and to be engaged and to give each other space for saying this is not what we've lived through, or this is what we lived through, or this is what we consider to be food, or this is not what we consider to be food. And that was like the wonder of the entire plenum. So these are the main actors. We did our multi-stakeholder action teams. We had 3 main multi-stakeholder action teams with each one with several different institutions, which at the end chose different objectives, commitments, and actions. That said, we're part of the process that we're doing, and part of our continuity process right now is to center more these objectives and these commitments and these actions into something that is more real and accessible in Medellin. So that's part of the process that we're doing, like accompanying the multi-stakeholder action teams, guiding, like not guiding, but just being with them through this process of delimiting exactly what we should do to continue the process. So that's part of our entire continuity process. And it means also, like kind of what Carlota was saying, just having meetings, continue the engagement, having another plenum, just interacting with them in a way that seems constant and solid. So basically these were these were like the main general details of what we did. But I think that what like the main outcome and the main achievement that we can mention is that we built a network in Medellin, which now can address, it can create activities from this sense of togetherness and from the sense of, it doesn't have to be like individually per sector or per individual to fight against the situation. We received a lot of positive feedback from all the participants, and yeah, we're hoping like to continue. Thank you.
So much, Claudia. Amazing. I just want to say, it's such a challenge. I'm asking people within 6 minutes to resume 1 year's worth of collaborative process. So thanks for the host teams to try and be like short, and at the same time, it's like, there's so much more to tell. Okay, great. So I'd love to hear from Madan from Nepal.
Hello, everyone. Namaste. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I'm so much glad to be part of this celebration. Thank you so much for joining. Warm greetings and namaste from Nepal. So Nepal Food Networks is our team where we have been working with diverse multiple stakeholders in co-creation of collaborative Nepal's future food system. We act as a platform which initiate and contribute to broader dialogue in the food system in Nepal, and we have built so much of collective organizations. And in the CIP, Collective Impact Program, we have 5 host team members from Nepal, Tulsi, Prashant, me, myself, Madan, Suman, and Prabhigya. We represent diverse sectors of food from ethnic cuisine to gastronomy to social entrepreneurship to agroecology. So our CIP project was focused on Province 1, which is in the eastern part of Nepal. The eastern part of Nepal, our context is like we work on a province as a whole, which is a large area. The province covers 15% of the national GDP, and agriculture contributes 36% alone. So agriculture ecosystem is a strong economy for Province 1. The Province 1 has very much diverse ethnic cuisine, diverse food production system. But the greatest inequality that we found is in the access to nutritional food and food to the people who are living in poverty due to inefficient food distribution system, food adulteration, and increased consumption of imported fast food. The local crop foods and diversity is in danger, and there are lots of climate-induced disaster. Climate change has been impacting on Province 1 more. So our CIP community conversation and engagement started with the stakeholder mapping, where we have identified with whom we can work together, identifying those stories and connecting with them through the stakeholder mapping. So we find out, we use network of networks to build up this string committee, and we personalize the invitation and form this strong string committee. Then we build a collective. To build the collective, we did the intensive on-site string committee meeting in Ilam. It was based in a farm. It was a nice stay. We had a good food, had really good time together to build up this connection and trust. And we are following up conversations, and our plenum is still to be held. So our stakeholder groups and demographics were like 32 people attended the event, in which 11 different food system actors were there, comprising farmers, provincial government, local government, entrepreneurs, businesses, tourism and hospitality, SMEs, academics, food processing sector, food advocates, and public health sectors. Out of the string committee meeting, we had the collective actions that were emerged, which was one of the outcome. One of the action was on working on school nutrition. Another was agroecology in centering agroecology in government program and policies. Another work was on ethnic cuisine promotion, and another action was in building community of best practices. So these are the collective actions that the different stakeholders come up together to work in these 4 areas. The outcome of the collaborations were like the people that never used to be together got chance to like really interact and hear each other to develop this trust and connection. The collective impact program itself has been a great journey for us, building it from ground up. Like we even did one event in Province 7, which was a great learning to take it to the Province 7. CIP has brought people in the same room which never used to be together. When the environment is conducive, we found that collaborative actions are inevitable. Like people really started working together to form the small actions that can be done locally to solve the emerging issue that was found during the meeting. And it also set a good ground for our greater initiative, which is Nepal Food Fair and Summit, which is to be held in December. As our geographic focus was huge and our social context was a little bit different, and plenum has to be postponed due to issues in the elections and other fiscal year closings. And we found that the effective partnerships was developed valuing the local assets and context. So we are looking forward for the CIP continuity with the regular follow-up meeting, organized plenum in September, and building this community of best practices, engaging a different stakeholder coming up together, sharing these stories, sharing these best practices, and building a greater momentum here in Nepal. And also we are really looking forward to bring these learnings of CIP into our greater movement in event of Nepal Food Fair and Summit. So thank you so much, and I look forward to hear suggestions and feedbacks. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Yeah, thank you, Madan. Is the diversity that you're seeing between the different host teams was intentional, just to be clear. There was a part of the pilot was to make sure that we were covering this diversity. Carlos, could you tell us the story of Santiago?
Sure. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, great. So as Q was saying, we all have like very different realities, and just like Q already said where we are right here, but just to get some context of how strangely weird and beautiful our country is, it's like there's a comparison. Like if you place Chile in Europe, that's how long it is, like all the way from Norway almost up into Africa. You know, I always love to share this. We had a painter who's called Mata. He says, we're not surrealists, we're realists from the South. So yeah, and the context is we had like a social uprising here in October 18th. This is our own Million Man March, Million People March, actually. This is the capital of Santiago. This is a very hardcore center, ground zero, as we started calling it here. So as Rafa says, sometimes this social uprising, as also Claudia was mentioning, right, in Colombia, it brought like to the surface like huge inequities in the system, right? And especially in the food system, and especially like those who were like slightly affected, like got really affected. And then the pandemic came, and this beautiful organization, Comida para Todos, whose Rafael's leading, got together and like made a lot of like allies, like around municipalities and companies and restaurants and NGOs and like a lot of those very different, and they started making a lot of progress, and they started just as early as March, April 2020, you know, and just the pandemic hit. And so it started moving and networking, and that's where we're like based the work of the hostings. What we did like last year regarding community conversations is that, first of all, we realized that we had like Comida para Todos had like a huge, large network of like people who already had trust in the institution and the institutions that were part of Comida para Todos and collaborating with it. But it was also, as you said, we're in a prototype, so it was a big learning process regarding like what works, what not, like do we need to discuss this, like what do people revolve around, what motivates people, what demotivates people. And we mostly learned that the important part of it was listening. Just like it's seemingly easy, let's say, exercise, but it's not really that easy, you know, to just sit and listen to what people have to say. So afterwards we worked on the plenum for this, and there were like 19 people showed up on the plenum, plus some people that we made it, even though it was small, we made a streaming of it so we could record it and have like some videos to just like upload afterwards. But we had these sectors represented that were like NGOs and foundations, and I separate NGOs from foundations because these were like base organizations, like civil society organizations, people from agriculture, also people from the academic world, and community leaders that were like those affected by food insecurity and inequity, right? And we came up with two like multi-stakeholder action teams, but like for purposes of this is the one we're carrying along with, like more decisively and more focused in. And there's like, the reality of this is like Villarauco, which is like the second one in blue, right? They're like, this is like a local like neighborhood organization that's led by women, I'm sure we all know very strong women, and especially those attached with this kind of insecurity and inequity, right? So the whole goal of it, like the purpose or the focus, is to get young people involved in the community kitchen. You know, part of the things that I was mentioning earlier about like inequities and things coming like hardly into the surface is like people having not having enough food to eat. So there was this thing, it's called ollas comunes in Chile, which I translated as community kitchens. And what they do is like they provide like food for the people that live in the neighborhood, right? But there were not enough young people involved in this, because as well, and you know, food just gathered people around it. So it became a lot more than just a community kitchen. It became a space. They have like a small like huerta there, like sport. And and there's of course it's a very vulnerable neighborhood, so they have like a lot of drugs and kids getting into like destructive activities, as I state like there, you know. And so the whole goal of this multi-stakeholder action team is to get the like young people involved in the community kitchen and in the community space in order for them to get into more productive activities. So we stated a time frame of 6 months, like up until December, right? And the organizations that were part of it is Por Todas, which is an organization led by women, and it's for women. Por Todas means like for them, like, but in Spanish it's like gender specific. Todas, it's her, it's just women. So then Por Todas, they fund and help and provide like technical assistance for like organizations led by women. And then it's Villarauco, which is the local organization in the neighborhood I just said. And there is RIMICIP, which is a Latin American Center for Rural Development, you know, and then again, it's a lot more about the people and just the whole organization. And then there's Comida para Todos and Rafa and Camila, which is always part of this, like from the early start. And that's Rotación as well, which we're trying to articulate and network and just map and understand what's going on in order to replicate it like more consistently over time. So what did people celebrate during the plenum? It was just a great space to get to know each other. What was the line of works? And the thing is, like, most of the people are doing the exact same work, but they're not connected. So it's like they're just struggling double, right? They also celebrated the methodology for decision making. You know, it's just asking people and telling them like, hey, what do you think it's important for you and stuff like that. Like the virtual participants, they really celebrated that. We streamed the plenum, right? And of course the coffee breaks. That was like, I was thinking about just making one big coffee break, because that was the time where people got to know each other like intimately, like besides what we were focused on during that the meeting, right? And what were the emergent outcomes that were like great is that we found some spontaneous collaborations that I'm going to speak a little bit in length a bit later in this meeting about, for example, Por Todas and Villarauco. It's just they met and merged and they just fell in love and still in love. And it's just great to see what's happening there, like other than what we ever intended, right? Also network analysis, we got to get like a huge network of people around, like even those who did not show up, like they gave us like contacts to their own networks. And so we got to make like a mapping of the organizations. We also had like an outcome, those audiovisual content out of the meeting. And of course, it's a huge like learning ongoing process. It's like the apprentice attitude, you know, it's like, I love thinking about naiveness like as a value, like a great thing to not know things and just like going along the way. So what's next? This is a picture of Villarauco. That's like people from Por Todas, RIMICIP, as we said, like the women from Villarauco, Rafa, Camila. And Comida para Todos is going to help like fundraising and articulating the whole MSA team, like focus and team. And then Por Todas, they have like a lot of technical toolkits, and also like, since they're a foundation that's focused on women's organization, they can give economical support. Rotación is going to help with human resources and networking. RIMICIP also networking toolkits for like small workshops that are going to be designed for the youngsters, you know, the children, the adolescents on the territory. And Villarauco, they're hosting. So it was lovely. We asked them like, what can you do? And they say, well, we commit to work, just like whatever it takes. So it was beautiful. And so that's the email. And I think Steph's going to share as well the emails for each organization. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Twin Cities. We'd love to hear about your journey. So I'm not sure if it's Michelle or Devon who's sharing.
I don't know if we're sure either, Q.
Good morning. It's up to you, Michelle. What do you want to do?
I asked you to present, so I think I'm going to be presenting in a different section. So
Great, that works. Teamwork makes the dream work. Good morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Okay, thank you. And I'm setting my timer for myself too, because This is a lot, and I apologize.
Oh, I love you. We're so late, but I'm gonna find other ways to get around that
That's all
because
right.
you
That's
guys,
all right.
these stories need to be heard.
Thank you so much. So Devon Nolan with the Metro Food Justice Network, which is our Twin Cities version of the network. And I apologize in advance because I'm going to go through these really quickly. I think it was important to kind of set some of the social context that we are in the Twin Cities, St. Paul and Minneapolis, that are separated by this beautiful river in the middle. Can you see the slides okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the present version. Sorry about that. I'm going to do this. A little bigger. There we go. And that in the context of Minnesota, it is still a very rural state, and that 24% of the people of color in the state. So it's still very white. And there's some of the social context. I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a long history of chattel slavery, systemic oppression, structural and institutional racism that drive the need for our food justice work in the United States. We are doing this work in the social context of the civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd, which was just one of the highly visible things that happened, but a reoccurring occurrence of people losing their life that way. And that Minnesota is the 6th largest state for agriculture. Some of the background, our initial host team includes myself, Reese Williams, and Michelle Horowitz. The Metro Food Justice Network was born out of a collective effort that had some momentum behind it. At this stage, we have these 5 host backbone organizations: Appetite for Change, The Good Acre, Health Fairview, Hunger Solutions, and Pillsbury United Communities. This timeline shows, again, some of that history. Hugh mentioned earlier that we, because we're in a different context, which I've so appreciated learning about what's happening globally, we had some work that we could build on that started in 2012. Some of the local opportunities for change is addressing top-down approaches, not having enough diversity in the leadership and representation of the work, an inherent lack of trust, again, because of some of that history that I mentioned earlier, a competition for resources, even though we are resource rich in our state and even in our country, just by design and the social context, there's this competition that is in there, some innovation gaps, and sometimes there's some duplicate efforts because there's not enough cohesion around the work. The local context, again, we have a history of collaboration, some social shifts in the social context. We've built trust over the years. The Twin Cities has a strong infrastructure and institutions around philanthropic, NGO, government, and local policy councils. We do have a strong base of passionate and dedicated leaders who are doing the difficult work every day, the thankless work, the blood, sweat, and tears, the stuff that's not pretty. The action teams are already collaborating toward collective impacts. And so we have some momentum that we can build on. The local needs that we can address are around having an actual network weavers, again, to foster that cohesion around the efforts, having a shared leadership model so there's not just one organization kind of carrying all the weight and driving the work, resources for community leadership, alignment around goals, that the need has never been greater. We are in the middle of a global pandemic still, and that has exacerbated the needs that we're seeing. And that's just not in our context, right? That's a global issue. This community conversation that happened, and you'll see a little more on the next slide about that. There was a survey that was sent, backbone organizations, and I'm just trying not to read through every slide because you can see it, have signed memorandums of understanding, really having a binding agreement that outlines whose role is what and what those measures of success are, and then planning our first plenum. And so we did a plenum June of 2022, and these are some of the survey results around some of the needs are in the, excuse me, I'm trying to move my slide here, areas within the food system that we could target and focus on. And then a few, again, around that plenum, June 23rd, it was virtual. We had over 100 participants registered, 80+ individuals attended. It was for a full day meeting, so people were able to come in and out as their schedule allowed. And what parts of the food system does your work focus on? You can see the survey results there. We did have a pretty good mix of representation. And then to the stakeholder action teams. These are the action teams that emerged initially around youth, policy, some of the needs around food in the private colleges. We do have a very vast university system here, the prepared meals, and this idea around grow. And try not to read the slides, but I'll pause on this one for a minute. And you can see the mix of the breakdown of the numbers of people who participated in each of those. Again, those action spaces around youth, policy, a place-based urban agriculture group or GROW, private colleges, and the prepared meals. I'm watching the time here. And then next steps, supporting emerging action teams and helping the work come together. The leadership team breaks into working groups around sustainability, action teams, engagement and communications, and to collect and dissect the survey results and really figure out what does that mean? What does that translate to as far as how it informs the next phase of our work? And then starting to plan for our second plenum in October. Little information around goals. I think the big one I want to pull out is really around governance. That will be an important part of this work, figuring out who those decision makers are, how those decisions are made, and how we measure success. And that's it. Hotep, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Devon. Amazing. Right, so this is like a quick overview of what's been going on in each of the host teams. We're a little bit over time. I was hoping to share one story from each of the host teams around what unites the approach, so that we could go a little bit into that, because I think, as you've noticed, like all of the host teams in this CIP process have got up to the stage where the multi-stakeholder action teams are born. So we're still yet to see what's going to come out of those multi-stakeholder action teams. But I think also that's not a coincidence, because the focus of this program really has been on how does an action team emerge, that it does emerge from the community, cross-sector community, naming its own needs and learning to work together in a way that's doing with, not for, that has the people who are experiencing food insecurity and inequity an integral part and partners in the process, not just people who are consulted, but people who are in the very partnership, developing it from the beginning through the implementation and to the evaluation. So because of time, I'm going to just do 2 stories. And then, because I think it's going to be nicer for you guys to have time individually with the host teams to ask whatever you want. So we're going to break out into rooms, and then we can have a conversation where more people can participate in the conversation. So I'm going to ask, seeing as we just started, actually, we just had the Twin Cities presentation, maybe one of the examples and the stories that I wanted to highlight around the quality of the doing with, not for, and the way we're going about this is how Minneapolis is going about the governance has been really interesting and really reflects the values of the approach that we're collectively taking. So I was wondering, Michelle, if you could do your best job to share the depth of all you have to share in as concise as time as you can, but without it being rushed.
Yep, thanks, Q. Hi, everyone. I'm also going to set myself a timer. I'm Michelle, one of the host team members in the Twin Cities. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we are trying to do on the sort of decentralizing power and shifting decision-making in this context of doing with and not for. So our steering committee is called a leadership team, and our backbone organizations are 5 organizations, and each organization has a seat on the leadership team, but then it includes currently 10 additional individuals who are not part of any of the backbones, and we're still there. We have about 5 or 6 additional, so we'll have a group of 20 leaders. All of them are being paid a stipend unless they work at an organization that's well enough resourced that they don't need the stipend. So if they're a really small community-based organization or an individual community member who's not employed in the food system to do their work, or just basically anybody who needs the stipend. It's not a ton of money, but it is we're trying to really value people's expertise and knowledge in their space or in their community. And this leadership team is going to be working with the backbones, like Devon said, on building a governance and sustainability model. So how are we collectively fundraising? Who are the prospective targets for funds, but also how do we make a business case to each backbone organization of why they should be putting financial resources into the network? Like, how does furthering the network and the action teams and the things that emerge cross-sector in our community further the mission and the work of the backbone, so it's worth it and it makes sense for them? But we're experimenting. It's an approach that we haven't really fully taken before, but because we've done this work for 10 years, we've been learning a lot and trying to adapt and get better. There you go. There's my timer.
Thanks. That's amazing. Thank you. Yes, the aspect of governance has been like totally key about how power is shared and decisions are made. And I was wondering whether, Claudia, you could share the story of the participation of people with lived experience. And there was a beautiful story of something that happened with this, we call him the seed guy now, don't we? I was wondering if you could just share that. We talked about sharing the other story, but I feel like that would be a great story to share now.
Perfect. So it's pretty brief. So in one of our third community conversations, we had a participant who is a person who has lived in a situation of food insecurity and is from one of the more peripheral neighborhoods in Medellin. And he just arrived to the meeting and he was totally engaged and totally more chill and nice. And at the end, he takes out of his bag this whole this set of seeds, and he just has different seeds from different trees, and he just goes to each participant of the session and he gives them a little seed, and it's a process. He holds their hands, he puts their hands in there, he closes it, tells them you're pregnant with this seed now, you have to sow it. And each person is it's a solemn process for each individual of the community conversation, and feeling everybody was there was just silence while he did this, and we all watched and we were okay, he's coming now for us, for each one. And it just left the meeting with this sense of so much hope and of so much look, he said this is what I do, this is I try to this is how I try to change the world, one seed at a time. And that was exactly what we were trying to do, one little step to achieve this very large change. So it was just very beautiful, and I think it represented what we're trying to achieve here. So yeah.
Thanks, Claudia. And can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you felt that enabled something like that to happen?
Yeah, I feel it's precisely feeling safe in that space, going to someone, going to towards someone from the private sector that you've never seen before, and you're someone who's maybe has never had access to that type of interaction, and just being look, this is what I know, this is who I am. I think that came from a space that has to be safe, and that has to have that it has to be kind of revolutionary for there to be that closeness and that intimacy between several individuals. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, you guys had a lot of conversations initially around where there was a lot of time for people to be together and discover what was important. And yeah, I remember that moment. The other stories that I just want to name the other stories because of time, is the other stories that we wanted to share was Carlotta in Märtala. I was actually there. They organized a full lunch before they even started the meeting, and it was really like a sit-down dinner moment, and it was beautiful, and people really got to connect there, and that was a wonderful moment. And I think it represents the importance of building trust and connection before going to talk about what it is that we're going to get done, that we can see each other as human beings before we kind of jump into that. Also in Medellin, the government, they came to present, and there was a moment of tension where people were upset about certain things, and there was a moment for people to be able to dissent, to share their frustrations, but still continue walking forwards together, even though there are, to recognize these tensions that were there. And Carlos was going to share also, and we're going to go into the breakout room so you can still hear from each of these host teams. So Carlos was also going to share about the collaboration that emerged that had nothing to do with the plan, but ended up becoming the focus of the multi-stakeholder action team, which was just, you know, it happened on the sideline. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into breakout rooms for 15 minutes. And so you can choose what host team you're going to be in, and Maya's going to guide this for us. Thank you.
So host team members might be automatically assigned, but for everybody else, if you click on the breakout room icon at the bottom of your screen, you can choose from one of the 5 host teams. If you're on a phone, that will be on the top left corner normally. And if you can't find the button, just unmute yourself and tell me which one you'd like to go in, and I can assign you there.
Welcome back, everyone. I was wondering if we could just hear from a couple of people on something you're taking away from this call, or something that struck you about the conversation you had, and you could share with the whole group before we talk about closing and next steps.
Q, all I want to say is I want to do a world tour and visit each one of these sites. And I will pay a fee to SGM to help organize it.
The whole room just lit up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I'm amazed to see each presentation. I'm amazed by the storytelling. I remember like 4 months ago, I was like, we're not going to be able to do a forum so fast. Like I was like, I don't know if people are going to be participating, and see the number of like really important stakeholders in Medellin and also in the other CIPs. For me, it's magical. And I think from there, we will be able to co-create a lot of other things. So I think right now we have a wonderful momentum. We have a beautiful collective storytelling. And now it's about to see on how we keep it going, and that this doesn't like fall or that it get lost, you know, because right now we have a really good base in each one of the cities. So yeah, thank you for co-creating magic together with us also in Medellin, and I just loved it to listen to all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. I think we can hear from one more person before Steph's going to just share some next steps.
I can go, Q. Oh, Michelle, where are you going?
I just was going to say, I thought it was miraculous that Devon and I met somebody who lives 2.5 hours away from us on this call.
Wow.
That you didn't know before.
That we didn't know before, yeah.
It was fun, and we will keep connecting.
Thanks, Rob. Rob was a great help on this as well. Devon, you were going to say something, and then Steph's going to wrap up for us.
I'm just in a place of immense gratitude, Q. I need these reminders that I'm not alone in this fight. And you've probably heard me say that more than once. So I always brag on you all the time. I got people in Chile, I got people in Nepal, I got like knowing that those connections are there and that we're working toward the same goal. It just really changes the way that I do my work. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Devon, we have these peer-to-peer meetings once a month with all the host teams, and every time Devon comes and speaks, she just like lights up the room again, and like everyone's got energy again, and she reminds us how important it is to be together. And so thanks so much, Devon. It's been amazing having you on this journey. Steph, could you just share a few like last comments and next steps?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Q. So just before we continue, I also want to take a moment to express gratitude for everyone joining us today, not only to listen and to learn together, but also celebrate all these milestones and what we've been able to build together and learn from each other. So Carlotta, Claudia, Madan, Carlos, Devon, you've presented, and other host teams who are also with us on the call. Thank you so much for sharing the valuable experiences and learnings from your work. It's really been inspiring, at least for me, to accompany you this last year. So I think there were a few typos in the emails I sent earlier. So if you'd like to get hold of the host teams, I am repasting the email addresses in the chat now. And in terms of what's next, I think like you said, this is really not the end of the journey. It's the beginning. And on the SGM side, our priority right now is to support the continuity of the amazing work that we've just heard about. And the next phase is focused on that bottom half of the pathway that Q shared earlier. And it's about ensuring we build the capacity, the momentum, the resilience to support the commitments that have been made and the responsibilities that we're holding with the communities, and also the multi-stakeholder actions that came out, while still doing with and not for, and holding that spirit alive. Q already mentioned the ongoing monthly peer sessions that we have in our community of practice, and there will also be the mentoring, one-to-one mentoring that comes along with that support, and continuing as SGM to highlight this work and make sure that the outcomes are shared more broadly with the wider community. And then lastly, this isn't just a one-year journey. We know that it takes time to do all of this work, and we want to evaluate and continue learning with our host teams and the action team's progress to ultimately be able to demonstrate what the long-term impact is beyond this first year. So aside from continuity, if you are motivated in your own localities to form a host team and join in the next cohort in CIP, please do get in touch. I'll put our email in the chat. We've learned so much from this year. And in the next round, we're looking at including a pre-course that would cover some of the founding elements of getting started on the program before leading into the main part for those who are ready to. This is still early stages, but we invite you to get in touch, drop us an email if you'd like to find out more. With that, I'd like it to pass it back to the group if there are any final thoughts that we'd like to share. Q, any final comments, or anyone else in the group? To share with everyone and see how we want to close this session together.
It's been amazing. It's been just such a challenge to get so much into like an hour and a half. And so I think for those who have like joined and participated, I know a lot of people who did join were like in the middle of their working day and needed to leave early, and this video is going to be, we're going to make it available. We're going to send an email to everyone that participated in this call with contacts and like ways to continue to stay engaged with us. So I think that will probably explain it better than any attempt that I'm going to make right now. Just wanting to check from the SGM team if there's anything you guys want to say before we sign off, because you know, this CIP is part of an SGM, the whole SGM movement, and we've been a project within that. And Maya, Mike, and Nikki are here also from SGM, and Paula was also, she was working with us, but she's still part of the core of us. And so, yeah, there's just a whole team behind this effort. So just checking if there's anything you guys wanting to say before we sign off. And Bruno, it was such a pleasure that you came.
I just want to say thank you, and a big thank you to all of the host team members who presented today. It was so inspirational to listen to your stories. And I loved our breakout room session as well. I just sat there absorbing like a sponge. And that's kind of been my experience. Every peer call I've been in with all of you, I just feel like I leave feeling nourished every time. So thank you so much. And yeah, it's kind of like a closing or a big milestone. So congratulations.
Well, we're leaving on a heart note. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye. Ciao. Congrats. Ciao.
Thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, Carlotta. Thanks, Devon.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Michelle.
Take care.
Thanks,
See ya.
Rob.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Camilla.
much, everyone.
Wow.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Namaste.
Madame. Namaste.